Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, we continue our journey looking at muscles of facial expression. And this is the fifth part. Now, these muscles are going to work on the eyelids, okay? And these muscles are just two. So we are going to look at the orbicularis oculi muscle as well as corrugator supercilia muscle. And so without much ado, let's set the ball rolling and look at these kind of muscles. So there we are. The first muscle we are talking about is what we call the orbicularis oculi muscle. We've already said that orbicularis, they produce that kind of circular, they have that kind of circular arrangement, okay? And then oculi, has to do with the eye. Okay, so that kind of circularly arranged muscle fibers around, the eyeball is what we call orbicularis oculi, muscle. Now this muscle is actually having two parts. It is having what we call the orbital part, okay, which forms that kind of ring around it, which is quite thicker. And then we have the less thick one, okay, which form the bulk of what we call the eyelid, okay, the upper and the lower eyelids. And eyelids are also called palpebrae, and therefore this part is also called the palpebral part, the one which covers the eyelids. Okay, that's the palpebral part. Now that portion where it's very closer to the medial wall of the orbit, okay, very closer to, of course, where the lacrimal bones are. Okay, part of what we call the palpebral part will be called the lacrimal part. Okay, so that is what we have. So this muscle, yes, it's going to originate, okay, from what we call the orbital margin. Okay, so if you talk about the orbital margin, yes, we have the supraorbital margin, we have the infraorbital margin. So from the orbital margin, okay, and of course from what we call the medial palpebral ligament. Okay, there's a ligament there known as medial palpebral ligament, together with, of course, the lacrimal bone. Okay, so that's going to be the origin. Then by way of insertion, it will be inserting, yes, around the skin, okay, around the what we call the margin of the orbit. Yes, so the skin around the margin of what we call the orbit. Okay, skin around the margin of what we call the orbit, together of course what we call superior and inferior, what we call tarsal bones, superior and inferior tarsal bones. Okay, we also give that kind of insertion point to it. Okay, now one thing that we have to know is that these two parts we are talking about, being of course the orbital part and of course palpebral part, they have functionally different let me say roles that they play. What happens is that the palpebral part, okay, works let me say in an unconscious, doesn't work under the conscious of the subject. Okay, so it works in an involuntary manner, okay, the palpebral part. Because for instance, if someone wants to put something into your eye, then by way of that kind of reflex action, yes, your eyelids will have to close, and it's by that kind courtesy of the palpebral part. So the palpebral part, yes, what it does is that apart from yes working that kind of unconsciously, it helps closes the eye gently. So if you sleep and then you close your eye, you don't close it tightly, and it's by the kind courtesy of what we call the palpebral part of what we call the orbicularis oculi muscle. Now for the what you call orbital parts, the orbital part will be important, okay, enclosing the eye tightly. So it means that this one is under your own conscious control, so it is voluntarily controlled. The palpebral part, its action is voluntarily controlled. Now I told you that that portion which is very medial, okay, medial to what we call the orbit, okay, of what we call the palpebral part, is known as what we call the lacrimal part. And therefore that one will be very important in, of course, spreading tears across the eyeball. Okay, so that is the the rules that these ones are going to play. Okay, so that is that. So as you can see, this one, yes, has close the eye, okay, close the eyeball, okay, but of course using that kind of, so this person has closed the eye quite tightly. Okay, so it means that it is making use of course the orbital part. So the other muscle in this group which are going to work on the eyeball, yes, is what we call, the corrugator superciliary muscle. Okay, so corrugator superciliary muscle, yes, originates, okay, from the medial aspect of what we call the supraorbital margin. We know there's the supraorbital margin, medial aspect of the supraorbital margin, that is its origin. And of course, it will insert, around where we have the skin, okay, associated with, of course, the eyebrow over here. And therefore, upon contraction, to be pulling the insertion downwards this way. And that is why to be relevant in produce that kind of vertical wrinkling, over the bridge of the nose. So if someone frowns, that kind of expression you find on the face, yes, is due to the contraction of the corrugator superciliary muscle. And this corrugator superciliary muscle, yes, will be supplied by what we call the temporal branch of what we call the facial nerve, temporal branch of what we call the facial nerve. Yes, of course, I didn't tell you, but of course the orbicularis oris, yes, that one will be supplied by, yes, zygomatic branch, as well as, of course, the temporal branch of what we call the facial nerve. But for corrugator superciliary, it is supplied only by, of course, the temporal branch of what we call the facial nerve. So there we are. If you can see the subject, that kind of vertical wrinkling that you find over here, yes, is by the kind courtesy of what we call the corrugator superciliary upon its, contraction. So I believe you find this, tutorial helpful. Yes, in future videos, you will be able to do other ones, which, we are here to do. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Have a good night, and may the good Lord richly bless you.